Supergiant Games is one of the most beloved gaming studios in the world. You're probably familiar with the critically acclaimed Hades, but might also remember their first indie darling, Bastion, the highly praised and inventive game Transistor, or even their most underrated hidden gem, Pyre. Supergiant, over the span of 13 years, has made hit after hit, becoming a model for what indie studios can achieve, showing that they too can stand shoulder to shoulder with AAA titans of the industry. Back in 2011, they made their first splash with Bastion, a Diablo 2 inspired action RPG where a beautiful shattered world reconstitutes itself in front of the player. Some of the staples of every Supergiant game can be found in Bastion's original DNA, and it's hard to tell which element encapsulated the experience best. Supergiant is known for their narrators, breathing life into the world they've created, and it all started with Logan Cunningham's voice for the old man in Bastion, who tells you about the lost souls turned to dust as the player explores, giving names to people who once lived in this beautiful place.
The Thunder Brothers didn't make it. They never saw what it was like beyond the walls.
Supergiant is known for its art, which also helped them instantly stand out among hundreds of other indie titles. And they just so happened to have grabbed one of the most talented artists working in the industry, Gen Z, who instantly recognized the vibe they were going for. Supergiant Games have amazing soundtracks that players can listen to with their eyes closed and instantly get transported back to these amazing worlds, and it's all thanks to Darren Korb. Supergiant Games are known for their isometric levels and satisfying combat. Most were designed by Gavin Simmons and developed by Andrew Wang. But at an indie studio, you also have to be a generalist and help out where you can to keep the ship from sinking. Finally, Amir Rao is the charismatic creative director who pulls everyone's talents together, funneling their energy into each masterpiece. But perhaps the greatest contribution to Bastion is another element Supergiant is known for: its story. The well-respected Totalbiscuit always believed the greatest strength of the video game medium was an intimate marriage between gameplay and storytelling. While most games elect to use story as a jumping-off point, a way of providing context to a world or scenario, or pepper their gameplay with well-made cinematics to tell their narrative as a playable film, Totalbiscuit believed players needed to play through their meaningful choices, in an experience only video games could provide. Bastion, this little game on the Xbox arcade from a first-time developer, did something incredible that Totalbiscuit could never have expected. In Bastion, with its limited but beautiful game assets, the writer of the game, Greg Kasavin, was able to offer the player a choice between forgiveness or violence. If you chose to save your would-be villain from his fate, you would carry him on your back through a hail of enemy fire, silently struggling forward, resigned to both your fates. Until suddenly, the Ura cease their fire, confused, watching your slow, labored progress upwards. One of them begins shooting again, only to be harshly reprimanded by one of his comrades, as you climb past them with Zulf in tow and finally reach the Skyway, escaping to the Bastion. It was a perfect marriage between gameplay and subtle, show-don't-tell storytelling, and in that moment, Bastion became Totalbiscuit's Game of the Year.
I have never seen anything done this way before. It is certainly one of the most competent debuts of any company ever, and my god, did they do a good job with it.
That was like the kind of game we dreamed of making, and one day we look back and it's like, oh dang, I guess we kind of made one of those after all and people liked it. So that was, obviously very reassuring, in addition to allowing us to stay in business and proceed to make more games together.
My favorite parts of Bastion are the parts that everyone else worked on. So I love listening to the voiceover and the music and the world of Bastion that Greg wrote. And Greg also designed half the levels. I much more enjoy playing his levels than the levels I worked on. Just knowing what Gavin and Andrew were able to build in terms of an engine and technology that's the basis for everything we do today over the course of such a short period of time. Yeah, Jen's art, obviously, the people who chipped in a little bit of help here and there along the way. I think about the relationships on that game and I feel really good because I still got them. I'm still working with these people. So it's really, 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 really nice to think about Bastion because I think about the people who made it and I think about their work, and I feel really good that we're still working together.
This was Supergiant's first game, and it wouldn't be the last. For Transistor, Supergiant had to make a choice: Bastion was a bit of a sleeper hit, eventually making enough money to move the team out of Amir's dad's basement into an actual studio in San Francisco. They had always known what Bastion was gonna be as their team grew for the first time, but now they had to decide whether to make a safe sequel or strike out on their own and risk everything to create an entirely new world. This is Supergiant. What do you think they picked? All they knew was that they wanted to create a sci-fi romance, and it took over a year of pre-production to find their footing as a team and figure out the secret to getting lightning to strike twice. They originally imagined the main character as a man on a mission of revenge for his lost love, who had her beautiful voice stolen, but it didn't feel right to the studio. At the same time, Gen Z and Greg Kasavin had also been dreaming up an unrelated fantasy story, where a woman falls in love with a man who is then slain by a demonic sword. Somehow his soul lives on, trapped within that very sword.
That idea actually stuck, and we came back when we were trying to problem solve and what to do with the story of Transistor. It's like, God damn it, why aren't we doing that? That was the story that we wanted to make.
With this first concept art of Red holding the transistor, it was suddenly the exact spark of inspiration Supergiant needed. Now the sword could become the narrator, while Red, with no voice of her own, only had her lost loves for company, clutching the thing that killed him, that she would use for revenge against the mysterious Camerata. With their idea, the team began to fire on all cylinders, creating a technological roaring 20s as the setting, where citizens are swallowed and integrated by something called the Process, transformed into somewhat organic-looking robot enemies. People's souls are also found digitized into a moveset that can be used by the transistor, and each of these skills can be mixed and matched for hundreds if not thousands of interesting permutations. Not only that, but in a more classic RPG style, you are able to pause time and plan your next moves. For a few brief moments, you can hear Red's lost voice in her head. In 2014, they released their second smash hit, which was even more successful than they were already anticipating.
It wildly exceeded our expectations as far as the excitement, the raw excitement over the announcement. We were shocked because just days before, we were so concerned about how the announcement was going to go that we were very close to just pulling the plug on it. We should wait. We're not done. We're not ready.
The reason I sound like this when I talk about Transistor is because of how scared we were. We were just terrified. And so everything I say about Transistor when I transport myself back there is from a completely fear-based point of view of oh my God, this is the game that kills the company, and this is the game that undoes the legacy of Bastion, and this is the game that we made, that all these little decisions we made, maybe we made too many ones that are too esoteric and aren't for certain players, and people were really kind to that game, and they're even more kind to it a year or 2 or 3 years later. It's the kind of game where I feel like the reception just got better and better and better and better. The best thing about Transistor, no matter how it would have ended up doing, is that it came out and we were done with it, because we needed to do that. That way we needed to go through whatever that was. We needed to figure out how to work together, how to start a game together, how to finish another game together, how to work in an office together, how to make big decisions as our own publisher.
Just as they had hoped, it reminded players of Bastion while retaining its own striking identity. With each game, Supergiant grows and evolves as a team. But after finding enough success, they were ready to accelerate that growth, fully leaning into the weirdness and take a risk on one of the most ambitiously crafted, most unique games ever put to code. Pyre is hard to explain.
How would you explain it?
Oregon Trail meets NBA Jam.
Is it a visual novel, or an ancient sports game, or a dating sim? Yes, it doesn't fall into any solid categories, blending several game genres together into a high fantasy world. You play as someone from the Commonwealth, dropped into the downside for the sin of reading. But it's also reading that's used to perform the magical rites, the only way to escape. It's an ancient ritual, essentially 3v3 basketball with aura, used to determine who gets to go home and be forgiven for their sins.
The sports influence is clearly there.
goals. What are they called again?
The Pyres.
Of course.
The Pyres, Danny. The original name for Pyre, of course, was goals, but we decided to not go with that. Yeah, I mean, we were, I think as part of it is like we were interested in this sort of competitive ritual, which ended up having a lot of sport-like qualities, So it ended up having this like 3-on-3 vibe where you're passing the orb around and you're trying to basically dunk the orb in the opposing pyre.
The auras in Pyre had a lot of inspiration from kind of like territory control, whether that was from like a game like Civ or SRPGs or something where you're kind of trying to like control territory and block certain routes and stuff. We talked a lot about like how flexible or how rigid the auras were supposed to be, and what different like shapes they could take that might be fun.
Sinners, remember everything which you hold dear.
Along the way, you meet the most colorful cast of characters Supergiant had ever created up to that point, and you must use each of their skill sets to do battle with other denizens of the downside. Because not everyone can go home. The game's ending is determined by how well you perform the rites, how many people's freedom you manage to earn, and who you ultimately decide must stay behind.
And then it puts together a song based on what happened in your game. Oh my God!
Because we had bards, and the idea was like the bards are sort of describing your epic deeds, right? That was like, I knew I wanted that to happen early on, and we prototyped a thing where we could have reactive vocals that would sing something different based on choices you made or something you did. What happened to each of the individual characters, either they ascended or they did not ascend, essentially, was how we broke it down. Because if we made it less binary than that, there would have been like thousands. I mean, it's so...
Pyre is unlike any game I've played, or indeed will ever see played again. It truly is a game only Supergiant could have made.
And it's why it's my favorite.
This is a studio that refuses to get stuck into a rut. They refuse to sit on their past successes or sit on their past laurels, and they could very easily just produce a Transistor 2 or Bastion 2, more of the same that they know people like. But they don't. This is a wildly different game, with wildly different goals and mechanics, and a wildly different vision. Different design philosophies. Whatever genre this is, and there's a lot of disagreement on it, I'd just like to describe it as Pyre and take it as that. You know that I'm really big into Supergiant stuff, but I think the very interesting thing about this one is that this is the least Supergiant game that there is, and yet it may very well be the most accomplished, despite it perhaps having the most glaring flaws, simply because of how dangerously innovative it is. Nobody's done this, and I wonder if they ever will again. Maybe there's only one studio that can make something like this. Maybe that's Supergiant, and I wish them success on this, and I hope that the next game that we get is a complete surprise as well. Keep being crazy, folks at Supergiant, please. As I've mentioned time and again, critics, we often pursue the new and the innovative and the bold and the dangerous and the creative and the risky because we've played so many of the safe. And safe is totally fine for consumers. Got to pay for your games. I understand. But every now and again, there's an experience so unique that it's worth taking a chance. And I think you really should take a chance on Supergiant's Pyre. I did, and I'm just really happy that it's here. Pyre, ladies and gentlemen.
Totalbiscuit was sick with cancer and passed away May 24th in 2018. Pyre, in 2017, would be his last Supergiant game. He could always trust their dedication to polish and genuine commitment to quality. He fell in love with their narratives and worlds. He respected their willingness to take risks, to go where no developer had gone before. As a critic, he had played hundreds, if not thousands, of games, but their studio, and the 3 games he knew them for, became his favorite. Pyre was a treat for him, a true delight, and it's how he introduced me to the studio in the first place. Pyre might be forgotten by many, but not Supergiant. The truth is, Pyre walked so that Hades could run.
Without Pyre, you would not be playing Hades. That's right. It took what Pyre was to drive the types of evolution we went through as a studio after Pyre to then make Hades.
The cast of characters, insane amounts of dialogue, expanding worlds,
Death is your only family.
the pure ambition needed. The team had come a long way since Bastion. And yet the studio continued their trend of confronting challenges head-on. Their games had always been known for being complete, finished, fine-tuned single-player experiences. But Hades was launched in early access on the Epic Store. Hades was an infinitely replayable roguelike, but had a story and an intense focus on narrative, unlike any roguelike that had come before it. As they were constructing the game, building rooms and characters and mechanics, they had narrative reasons to justify all of it, like Hades being under construction or renovated. The game was already spectacular, but had clear gaps for the community to help build out the world. By the end, Hades had more art, more characters, more weapon combinations, and placed great trust in their player base's feedback during this titanic endeavor, in the same way their players had come to trust them. Totalbiscuit would never get to see Hades, and the incredible success that game would bring Supergiant, skyrocketing them into the mainstream. But I think you would have been happy to see them reach these new heights and get the respect they deserve, having their game rated alongside Mario and Zelda, put up for Game of the Year against AAA giants like Ghost of Tsushima and The Last of Us Part 2, becoming Game of the Year for many outlets and countless individuals, just like I'm sure it would have been for the cynical Brit. It was easily Supergiant's greatest success, even inspiring their first sequel, and ultimately solidified their names on history in the gaming industry.
We're asking each other what it means. It means that it is possible that a decade in, that this is some of the best work we've ever done together, which would be crazy as an idea. Like, it would be crazy because it like validates the whole point, right? Which is like, you know, if we could do this together for a really long time, it would be meaningful and make stuff that is meaningful to other people, which is cool, which was really cool.
With Hades 2, Supergiant for the first time didn't have to reinvent the wheel and learn the challenges unique to creating a sequel. How much can you change from your most beloved game to improve it, to give it a distinct identity, while at the same time not just making the same game again, playing it too safe? With their new protagonist being a witch, she's far less of a dash spammer compared to Zagreus, utilizing mana and the new Omega attacks to create impactful but more thoughtful feeling gameplay. The weapons, while similar in some functions, have been changed, reworked, replaced, and fine-tuned. The way you level up is more balanced to Supergiant's vision of forcing the player to make more meaningful choices. There's an entirely new cast of interesting, never-before-seen characters, more obscure gods from Greek mythology than the famous Olympian pantheon, making the game eventually even bigger and better than Hades. As far as a sequel to one of the best roguelikes of all time is concerned, Supergiant seemed to have captured lightning in a bottle for the 5th time running, and it's doubtful they'll stop anytime soon. The development experience of each of Supergiant's games was expertly captured in these no-clip documentaries that you should absolutely check out for yourself. The documentaries do a fantastic job of making you feel their stress about how their games will be received, despite you as a viewer from the future already in love with their games and aware of their success.
So, yes, the game just launched earlier. We're back from the Game Awards. I think that was the most stressful thing I've done in a long time. We knew it was supposed to go live in the first 30 minutes, and the premiere still hasn't happened. I went to epicgames.com, the store, whatever the URL is, and we can edit it in. I went to the store and it was there, and showed it to Greg, and Greg is like basically mainlining Twitter into his veins to see if anyone has seen it. 6:10 happens, and then 6:15 happens, and no one is talking about it, and no one has seen the game, and we realize that www.playhades.com 404s, it doesn't go anywhere, and that's the URL at the end of the trailer.
It's a testament to the skill set of noclip, letting Supergiant tell their own story so we get to see this beloved cast of characters in their natural element. Unbelievably, every Supergiant game had about 7 people until 20 in Hades, and each of them are walking megatalents, masters of their chosen creative domain, lucky enough to have found each other, and then crafted something greater than they could ever have imagined on their own.
If we don't make this, no one else is going to make this. And that's something I do look for in the games I work on here. They should, if nothing else, add something positive out there. It may not be for everyone, and that's totally fine. It's actually better for them to not be for everyone because they can be more specific and mean more to the people they are for. But that feeling of like, we've brought something unique into existence, and if we wouldn't have done it, nobody else would have. That's to me, it's a motivating feeling. The magic of our games, if it exists, comes from the creative conflict. It comes from the synthesis of ideas. I feed off of those ideas and do my thing and so on. So it's this weird like symbiotic process that's just made possible because of the group of individuals that we have here. And over time, it's just become clearer to us that we not only is our whole team is just kind of configured around the idiosyncrasies of the individuals that are here. We rely heavily on voiceover because we know Logan and he's a genius actor. Gen Z, I think, is one of the best artists working in the industry and stuff like that. It's just like we have very kind of music forward games because we work with Darren Korb. He's a genius composer.
I get to work with some of my best friends in the world. I get to work with some of the most talented people I've ever met.
It's literally impossible to choose one element over another. Taking one out, losing one of these core creators, would make it cease to be a Supergiant game. To see the studio evolve and grow is the real treat, because they demonstrate how slow and steady wins the race every time. They were ambitious and took risks, making games bursting with creativity, but with the humility to slow down when they needed to. And by treating their players with respect for over a decade, they've been rewarded many times over, achieving what they never would have thought possible. I can't wait to see what's next for Supergiant, my favorite indie developer, so I can honor the cynical Brit once again.